Hello, everyone. Welcome. As you know, I'm Dan Winter, fractalfield.com, flameinmind.com, and we have three famous co-hosts for today's conversation. Elena Dadon has honored us. Welcome, Elena.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone. So excited.
And today's conversation is actually in honor of Elena's new book, The Cedars, and some of the science behind. So she was kind enough to join us, and we are going to have fun because we have a lot of good science and pictures in the slideshow. And the other co-host today is Dave, Generation Z. We've done many films. Dave and Riel are with us. Say hi, Dave.
Thank you so much for having us. And I want to also give Riel an opportunity to jump in. And if you want to say anything, Riel, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for doing this. This has been, I'm very excited for this.
Yeah, thank you so much for including me. This is a dream come true to be able to share this platform with Elena, Patrick, Dan, and Dave. I am so excited and honored to be here.
It's and we should last but not least, Patrick Botti is with us, our wonderful programmer. Flameinmind.com does all the sacrocranial work, and since we're doing this with Elena and Elena's friend John Charles Moyen, where we measured his brainwaves for lucid dreaming and turning into a portal, Patrick was the programmer and co-host and featured in the film we did with Jean Charles. And Elena and friends might recognize Patrick. So the flameinmind.com software that measured Jean-Charles Moyen's lucid dream when it became a Stargate portal. And today's conversation, that's one of the big three topics of today's slideshow. And so Patrick was...
Hello, glad to be here with you.
Yes, and both Elena and Patrick are French, so and my partner Valerie's right here smiling and being slightly shy as usual. It's all good. So there could be a little French in the background anytime. So just by way of intro and background, in terms of Elena's new book, The Cedars, today we wanted to talk about, actually, there's three major themes. How plasma becomes intelligent. Hint, 9 plasma donuts called the 9. And the second is, what did Enki mean when he said he's bringing the Grail back? I think we have pictures.
I told you, Dan, you are going to love my book.
I loved it. Elena sent me already, so I'm lucky and grateful. And by the way, I understand it's already like a #1 bestseller, Elena, is that right?
24 hours, it was #1 bestseller on Amazon. And a few hours later on Barnes and Nobles, it was unbelievable, but believable.
It's like the secret history of the planet, basically, and the story of Enki Osiris and what that means. So it deserves to be a bestseller. I'm happy. And we support that with the science, and that's why we're here. It's very cool. And so the third major subject of today's slideshow. And the idea is we play with the slides and we have some fun dialogue. It's not all monologue. And then at the end of the slides, just an open, fun conversation, basically. That's the idea today. But the third subject is how it was that Jean Charles Moyen, when he had that incredibly intense urge, to literally to bilocate, and then the onset of intense lucid dream where right hemisphere versus left hemisphere, he could see a different thing with his right eye and left eye. Amazing when he described that. And then his lucid dream became a portal. He went to the beach and came back with sand between his toes, and there was witnesses, et cetera, et cetera. So his lucid dream became a portal. And we measured the frequencies of his brainwaves, which was obviously implosive. And that's Patrick's genius, why he's here. The cascade of harmonics in the brainwave from alpha to gamma, both octave and golden ratio, Caduceus-like cascade in the brainwave, obviously implosive and centripetal. And what we present today is literally the moment that became a portal, it was an urge to turn inside out. Like it turned inside out. And so, I would turn myself inside out for you, darling. Well, topologically, in terms of plasma. So we want to understand some of that. And so
may also say that I will orbifold myself for you. I think that's the you could say physics mathematical term of what you just demonstrated there topologically.
Orbifold, right? Fold the orb, exactly. And so we have visuals to go with that. But before we do that, Elena, I had just a sense that maybe there's something else you wanted to say or introduce here.
Yes, it's funny because you just caught my mind. I wanted to say something and I went, I don't want to interfere the flow. I'll say it at the end, but so it's now. Uh, I have in my head somewhere an implant that wasn't made on this planet that allows me to have a quantum connection to two different people who have the frequency key of this implant. And they are extraterrestrials. That's how they give me all the information that I get. I do not do channelings. I just get like this. So they taught me how to activate it. So it's a quantum technology device. The way I do is I get very calm. I get in a state of mind of, well, Dan would say bliss, and I think that's it. It's quietness and calmness and flowing, like if I'm a flow. And then I gather energy, the energy that is my own energy of my body, and also I try to vacuum the energy around me as much as I can. I concentrate it in my body, wherever it comes in my body, and then when I feel tingling everywhere and it's buzzing and it's like statics a bit, but not yet about to be static, it's like this. And by the will of my consciousness, of my mind, my own will, I visualize this energy and I send it to where it is on my device. And I concentrate it in a ball, in a sphere, and I pulse it, vroom, 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 vroom. And I really feel the back of my head, like it's like tingling. And I do that until it clicks and I hear click, and statics, like, and I'm connected. But when I do this, because to connect it, it needs to be connected to a point B, to a response, otherwise it doesn't work. So when I do this, I focus my mind to the person, one of the two persons who have this key, who are at the point B, that point BA, BB, it's the same frequency. And so I dial the number when I think about them and I say their name. If they're busy, they won't respond. The click won't happen. But if they respond, they feel, they hear that I want a connection, they will allow it and it will click. And then I can hear their voice clearly in my head, as if I had a walkie-talkie in my head, and I can see visions if they show me. So that's what I do. I wanted to bring that up if it can help in the discussion of today.
Oh, very appropriate. And in fact, the low frequency, I would believe, was related to something we call infrasound phase conjugate pump wave, basically completing the compression process implosively. And clearly, even, when Hartmut-Muller proposed global instantaneous communication, the physics is longitudinal interferometry, which is the phase conjugate compression that squeezes out that longitudinal compressional wave coherently. And that's what allows that action at a distance, because it has potentially infinite number of superluminal harmonics, golden ratio exponents times the speed of light. So that successful compression is very nicely fits your description, that you're compressing it there, and that's an activation process, almost literally implosive, and that the tuning process is engaging that embedding between the compression, which couples to the longitudinal array. And you can only couple to that longitudinal array if you get to that point of sufficient, literally critical mass compression. For example, by the way, the theory, Elena, would be that should be slightly easier at sunrise and sunset or at magnetic line crosses, because there's more longitudinal compression inherent. So the kind of DNA radio switches on a bit better.
If I may jump in with just a couple things, I just want to say, Elena, thank you so very much for describing that, because I'm working on some private projects myself with Dan and some others, and what you described there is actually how, in a certain regard, some of the projects I'm working on, I guess you could say, activate certain energy fields, if you will, in correspondence with the earth. So I just want to thank you so very much for describing that, because whether it's the human body or whether it's, nuts and bolts with, ceramic and aluminum and copper and wood and things like this, it's the same infrastructure and the same foundational concept. And secondly, I did want to ask, if you'd be willing to share, when you have that quantum connection with an individual, with a group, whether human or otherwise, is there sort of like a 3-piece or 3-step lock-in in your mind, for example, when you can make a communication with a particular group, person, or something like this, and then it builds from the 3, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I can tell you the steps of the procedure. First thing, the 2 different persons are part of 2 different ET races. One is human, and he has the same implant in his head. So it's like technology. It's technology connection. The other one hasn't got an implant. He's a different race. He's not human, and it's working by his consciousness. But he can tune in with the frequency of my implant, which is technology. So the steps are, first, gathering energy, like the compression thing. Step 2, dialing the number. I mean, thinking very strongly to the person, making a mind connection visualization. Already that's a sort of telepathy. And 3, it clicks and the device is activated. The device cannot be activated if the point B is not online. You know what I mean? So
And
would
the
be 3
theory would
steps.
actually be, the theory would also be that the frequencies chosen for that low frequency pump, like the 10 second Mayer wave or the low frequencies of the Schumann harmonic, that there'd be certain frequencies of the breath that would help engage that compression. For example, the caduceus breathing. So that's a very beautiful metaphor, and it relates to the onset of bliss in general. And
in all the different ways that I've rigorously done my best to study and try and understand, and in some cases develop certain, I guess what people normally call anti-gravity projects, that's exactly how it goes. No matter whether you're working with liquids, with different types of energies, so
it's implosion.
Right.
Yes. And so we have a lot of slides about that. So the idea would be that now we play with these visuals around the theme but that this was not intended to be a monologue, that we actually have some fun conversations during the slideshow. So do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So the theme was, this is about plasma intelligence to portals and the Grail. Special guests Elena Danan and Dave in Generation Z, Iris and friends. Well, Iris is not here, but our group that does the flameinmind.com/outer vision, teaching kids to see without their eyes, because that plasma vortex inside the head is how that vision develops. And that's also in part why Patrick Botti is with us from flameinmind.com. So the first question, the first set of slides here is about, how does plasma become intelligent? Remember, 99.99% of the universe is plasma, according to conventional physics. So if you know how plasma gets intelligent, then you can understand how anything got. And the second question, in honor of Elena Danan here, is, what did Enki and the Cedars mean when they said they're bringing back the Grail? Because we think we got pictures. And 3, in honor of John Charles Moyen and the film that Patrick and I did together with him, where his lucid dreams became a portal electrically. And we want to know how that works. And as we sneak preview, urge to turn inside out. So if you knew how plasma becomes mindful, then you'd know what ghosts do, how tornadoes are steered, how plasma heals, the origin of angels, elementals, where you can and cannot go in a lucid dream. You'd know why. Oops, I apologize for that. You'd know why ball lightning responds to telepathy. You'd know how your brain's plasma tornado sees without eyes. That's important because all those kids that Patrick and I have been working with and Iris, they say, oh, I saw a tube, a vortex appear inside my head while I was blindfolded. I looked down through that tube and I could see that we have hundreds of kids report the same phenomena. And to understand that, we want to see how that plasma tornado forms inside your head, which is how kids see without their eyes, and how you can take your vision outside your body in remote viewing, et cetera. And Patrick measured the same harmonics for the kids who see without their eyes, octave and golden ratio cascades, alpha, gamma, at more density when John Charles' lucid dream became a portal. So the same frequency signature in the brainwaves, identical, that enable the kid to see without their eyes and enables lucid dreaming. If you get more amplitude and coherence in the same Caduceus cascade in the brainwave, then your lucid dream becomes a portal. So the physics is, how did that plasma tornado get dense? So then you'd know how intent arises in black holes and wormholes like the 9. Oh, guess who's just joining us? Iris, from the kids who can see without their eyes. Iris is working with wonderful kids. Welcome, Iris. So you'd know the physics of the origin of the concepts of God and heaven, the spirit realm, is actually intelligence in the plasma. You'd know what orbs and elementals and nature spirits are. You know how alchemy works because it's also charge implosion. That's why it's called alchem, access to the black hole. Its non-destructive charge collapse is the definition of alchemy. You know why the implosion fractal conjugate point is the center of gravity of all mindfulness. So obviously that implosion is behind this idea of the golden ratio and fractal nature of life itself. In general, we've been teaching that for many years, and the origin of negentropy, which is self-organization, the only path out of chaos. So biologic examples of plasma fields becoming informed self-aware, Kundalini, we're going to show the alpha brachith, origin of the alphabet symbol, tornado steering for shaman, and how DNA braids into a torus, how the sperm and the egg, 7 stages of invagination is how the egg turns inside out at the moment of fertilization. Actually, I didn't bring those pictures today, but it's also beautiful. And you learn how the recursive turning inside out of the heart field is the EKG physics of love and compassion. So we've talked about this many times. Our friend George Edgley in Budapest, I think it was Budapest, yes. He was the one he's experimenting with carbon arcs becoming over unity. And he teaches about why and how ball lightning responds to telepathy. And remember, 9 donuts of ball lightning, one above the other, is the physics of the origin of the 9. We have the plasma physics. So if we knew what happens at the center of a ball lightning, which is obviously toroidal, that enables it to respond so consistently to telepathy, how did it become mindful? So the idea is that recursive turning inside out is how plasma donuts become mindful. And that's the idea, that the glue, we call it love long wave phi ratio, low phi, is literally embeddability, which is the climax form of what conventional physics calls entanglement. Conventional physics says action at a distance is entanglement into Einstein-Rosen bridge. But if you know the climax perfection of entanglement is phase conjugate embeddability, literally perfect nesting. So recursive turning inside out, a lot of people working on golden ratio, like our friend Dirk Meyer, show that the donut turning inside out recursively. There's lots of beautiful graphics of these things, and we just look at a few of those pictures. So the formation of the egg, the perfect black hole, how the double vortex pine cones kiss noses. What we want to visualize is where the pine cones are kissing noses, there is a plasma array that becomes resolved to the level of the Planck threshold. And that array, where you have coherence at the level of the Planck threshold at the center of the 2 pine cone kissing noses, in that realm of perfected compression, everything is sorted. And that's why, for example, in a phase conjugate mirror, you have negentropy, where the 2 lasers meet perfectly. And so this is related to the origin of the fine structure constant, and we have a lot of graphics on this, and we're not going to do the advanced physics today, but just so that you know, the origin of self-organization, which is donuts turning inside out, in physics relates directly to what's called the fine structure constant, literally the origin of perfection of structure. And then the perfect turning inside out donut becomes 5 spins inside, 7 spins outside. The Anu, the name of the heart of the sun, and the shape of the heart of the human, and what the clairvoyants saw at the heart of hydrogen is all Anu, which is the name of Enki's dad, sun god. And that is perfect turning inside out. And what the 7-5 spin is, even in the layers of human heart muscle, is the 7 spin symmetry axis of the tetra, which is a tetracubic, embedded inside dodecaecosa on the outside, which is the 5 spins. So when 5 spins inside and 7 spins outside is turning inside out, implosion perfected. So what all the clairvoyants were seeing in occult chemistry was actually the Star Mother kit turning inside out. And so here is perhaps the best example of turning inside out, and that is
all field effect in all of matter is self-organizing towards donut. The donut
Aleph,
is
Beit, Gimel,
organized in
Dalet.
a 7-color mass, and that self-organizes the golden mean spiral on the donut. If we tilt that golden mean spiral,
There's Yod Hey. So if I was sitting on the outside of a torus and looking at the torus from the outside view, I was looking at this spiral from this angle, I am therefore looking at the heart of that torus. And from that perspective, I'm consuming the perspective. I see the letter Beit, the container, the first letter of Breshith. But now if I walk 1/7 of the way around towards center and again look through my feet at the center, the consumed perspective from that angle is the letter Resh, okay, etc. So if I did that the 7th time, actually now I'm on the inside looking out instead of the outside looking in, and now the shadow I see is the Hebrew letter Hey, amorphous and space filling 5. And so I've spelled the word Bereshith, the first word of Genesis, originally translated in the beginning, but Faber d'Olivet, upon study, redefined more accurately the meaning of Bereshith, at first in principle, the origin of thingness. And the origin of thingness is obviously the symmetry operations of turns of mind to turn inside out on the surface of a torus, which is how the plasma became self-aware. And that's the beginning. So the Hebrew and Sanskrit then index the 7 spins of the tetra, which index the origin of the alphabet, both Hebrew and Sanskrit, with tagin or crownlet. But in the Sanskrit, the same index is the vertical and horizontal bar, which are put next to the same letter, which tells you your perspective with respect to the tetra cube. So you can shamanically orient yourself in plasma space. So actually what the alphabet is the ability to orient yourself in plasma space so you can shoot your jets and navigate. Like when you're entering a lucid dream, you are a plasma donut, so you need to know where to squirt your engines. And that orientation mechanic is the origin of alphabet, basically. And that was called the alphabet of the heart, which is the title of my first book. And it's about this spiral on the torus, obviously. And that's all at goldenmean.info/DNA ring. But it also is about how plasma became self-aware. And this is the part where I thought it was so much fun to work with Elena, because we had published this article, goldenmean.info/whale dreamers, because we worked with Tony Peratt, well, really with John McGovern in Australia, who published from Los Alamos Plasma Institute. The first day they nested 9 plasma donuts, one above the other. They found that is how plasma self-organizes, why you have 9 chakras, et cetera, et cetera. And when Elena later said, the structure of the 9 is embedded in the structure of the universe, Elena, I think that's one of the most cool things you ever said, actually. And so this is, the 9, they have the Egyptian Ennead and the Greek Ennead, and the 9 level, there's the pagoda, the 9 steps of Dante's Inferno, and the 9, and the Hopi Peshmate, and they all talk about 9 layers. And so this 9 is actually plasma physics. That's the point, actually. And this is an example of plasma becoming intelligent. So when in last Mimsy, he looks up and sees the origin of the Sri Yantra, which we're going to see the slide, is 9 interdigitated golden ratio tetra in 3D, actually. And that organizes into a plasma vortex in the heavens, as it were. And I don't know if you can see the bottom right picture, but it's actually a double vortex spider's nest making implosion. So animating the 9 golden ratio tetrahedron in 3D, making the Sri Yantra, you see that interdigitating those golden ratio, and this is actually where Sai Baba taught Pat Flanagan the first model of 3D Sri Yantra has 9 golden ratio.
And that center picture there looks exactly like one of the things I'm working on. Yeah.
It's about plasma becoming self-aware because it's implosive and negentropic, and the climax form of that is mindfulness, obviously, and that's what this was about. So, and a lot of these slides, most of you have seen before, how when Schauberger's vortex spontaneously got colder, it spontaneously started making voltage from gravity. So this is the implosion of not just negentropy, but 0-point energy devices. And this is what Dave and I are in the middle of, having a certain amount of fun. And indeed, this, when the vortexes piezo are the imploder.com vortex, becomes psychoactive, psychokinetic, and powerful. Hi, Iris, down there. Well, welcome to you. We're just talking about the kids here, Iris. We're going to get there. Thank you for joining us. So another example of that implosion is when you take these concentric implosive cylinders and they're capacitively implosive, and you bubble the hydrogen out of water. We're going to talk about the fractality of the hydrogen as the key to the grail in the DNA, what Enki's coming back with, the grail.
Those concentric rings are if I could say very quickly, for Star Trek fans, they're the basis of the ion thrusters, which are now called, I guess you could say, Hall thrusters, but yeah.
So basically, if you implode the capacitance at the implosion point, you spit out a component of the longitudinal array, which is a gravity wave. So negative ion winds at a climax potential is the beginning of gravity waves.
I have a question before you go forward.
Yes.
Please, I like to really go into the details and to really, really understand. What you say, something because the toroid becomes self-aware at the minute it turns upside down and becomes implosive. But why does it become self-aware? Is it opening a portal to, I don't know, source consciousness? It's not even that. It's I'd like you to develop why. Well,
thank you for asking the beautiful question, Elena. Obviously the right question. No, poetically, self-awareness has been defined as the ability to self-refer. And the ability to self-refer is the ability to non-destructively self-re-enter. And the reason that defines the onset of self-awareness is because it topologically defines the onset of implosion in plasma, donuts imploding. And when donuts implode, the convergent point at the center creates a plasma array that looks like the Holy Grail, literally, which is the mechanism by which compression engages what you could call DNA radio, which is the instantaneous communication that happens among all living beings using DNA because of the coherent longitudinal interferometry DNA radio, the collective unconscious, which is engaged when the compression is sufficient to connect with that radio, exactly like you just described a few minutes ago, Elena, actually. But topologically, we have more graphics on that. But so the onset of that community, why the whole world felt it when 3,000 people died on 9/11, it was measured capacitively. That wave, that spread, was because DNA radio was working. The very physics of why you feel someone outside yourself as if they're inside.
Dan, if I may ask very quickly, if we could apply what you said so elegantly in a, I guess you could say, in an example catered towards the ladies here in terms of, say, for example, reaching your hand into a purse, for example, but within that purse is an infinite amount of, dare I say, layers, if you will. And that purse is that non-destructive, self-implosive charge. And so each layer is part of your own personal journey of evolution within the purse, and reaching into the purse is sort of the we could say the metaphorical bed frame of the reality we're in, perhaps.
Nice poetry there, Dave. Really beautifully
Oh,
said.
thanks.
And we might say something a little bit more about that, in that something about you can only actually switch on that radio and keep it on if you have pure intention, because only the shareable wave survives, which is why at the moment of death, if you're angry, it don't work so good.
And a shareable wave can only be shared if it is symmetrical and straight and all connected.
And it
Whereas-
literally makes the grail. The double vortex turns 3D, becomes the grail, literally in the DNA, the physics of bliss.
Yeah,
So
I cannot connect to my contact if I am upset or super tired or sad or
exactly that. So this idea of becoming the perfect. So at that hologram of a universe of dodecaecosa interferometry, and the nodes in that hologram work better for telepathy. That's been measured. That what we mean when we say only the shareable wave survives, you can only get into there if you have pure intention. If you can do compression well, the only way to die successfully or have bliss successfully is to do compression well. It's what makes you shareable, because it makes you distributable into that perfect fractal array. Oh, there's a beautiful little person there. Hi, Iris. What a beautiful. Hi. So
this is Vindir. You met Vindir when we did the research.
Oh yes, she's growing up.
Yes.
So this is what, oh, Vindir.
Hello.
Vindir is the little girl that's probably the most genius at being able to see without her eyes.
Yeah.
We're about to talk about that conversation. In fact, the kids, Iris is inspired to be able to teach kids how to do that. That's why she's here. And her program is she gets kids feeling so relaxed and safe, almost like they were in a blissful forest. And when they go into that bliss state, then the compression is possible, the implosive turning inside out. And then the vortex, the little tube appears in their head. And all the pictures of that with Vindir are at flameinmind.com/outervision. So I don't know if we really answered Elena's question. What we did say is that connectivity that happens at the center of implosion engages something else. It engages the fact that focused human attention has been replicably measured to be electrically centripetal. And when you meet an advanced being, they even say the advanced Dracos, you can feel a vice-like grip of their attention. So the electrical density of their attention is related to the vice-like grip. So the more implosive you are, the more powerful your attention. That's why Gurdjieff says, don't start your sacred gymnastic until you can put the density of enough attention in your baby finger to cause it to tingle, similar to the way Elena concentrates her attention to turn on that radio.
Sorry to interrupt you. When you say self-awareness, do you imply with the consciousness element or not?
We did this little analysis of the topological significance of the word consciousness, and our conclusion was consciousness means with, SCIOUS, with turning inside out-ness. In other words, once it becomes recursively implosive, everything is sucked in and therefore can be sorted.
Via the orbifolding itself.
That orbifold is the perfect word. In fact, hopefully
Okay.
that's the next slide. So we wanted to look now where we see that in what's happening in the DNA at the moment of bliss. That's
choosing compassion carefully aligns the magnetic field donuts around
see
the
that
heart.
pine cones kiss noses. You've always seen this animation.
Self, not self. Squirting pineal pine cone through the speed of light.
We want to
at
see
time
this in the
intent
DNA.
towards
That's the
future.
next step.
And revolving that spin path to 0 point in the blood, we get the Holy Grail, which has no inside or outside, solves the problem of separateness, contains, self-embeds the Sufi heart within heart, feminine reproductive organs, into that 3D fractal. You can zoom in forever and always see the same thing. Heart within heart, perfectly self-contained, self-embedded compassion.
So we want to understand bringing back the grail is bringing back the ability that we can do that in the heart, in the blood, in the bliss. That's the idea. And so this is, I'm giving another example here. It's actually the group, the Therify group, plasma healing group in Ohio with the Amish just reported the lady there keeps seeing this double vortex cone when she's in the plasma. And here, this is Valerie's wonderful friend Marie Claire. She had a very intense mystical experience inside the plasma, and she doesn't know anything about what we've been teaching here at all. She speaks French, right? And she says, I kept seeing this bell shaped. She saw the grail, literally. And what's happening inside the plasma compression, it's a perfect metaphor. So the sevenfold flow form is another example of this. I think we have, so it's turning inside out. And the fold within fold, and the dishes are golden ratio, and the beat rate of the dishes are golden ratio. And so it makes implosion. And this is behind the imploder.com and the vortex technology. And the turning inside out recursively actually becomes the formula for the golden mean ratio, actually. And that we've talked about for years is the map of, if you take the electrical physics of investigating the electrical origin of the heartbeat, the book by Arthur T. Winfrey, When Time Breaks Down, and they electrically modeled where does your heartbeat come from? And this is the picture, actually. The voltage gradient imploding around the 7 layers of heart muscle. This is the picture, actually, in the biophysics literature of where your heartbeat comes from. Does it make you think of turning inside out, where the dimple gets sucked in? And if that dimple got sucked in recursively enough times, that would be a very long wave. The very nature of compassion, sometimes called, come on, baby, light my fire. So this is the introduction to the longitudinal scalar part of this, and you've seen these pictures before, that the very nature of mind and consciousness is this embedding in this longitudinal array, which Aboriginals would call songline or dreaming track, which we now know is the physics of gravity waves as well. And the difference between the transverse wave above versus the longitudinal wave below, a compressional or scalar, and that where the longitudinal waves converge implosively is where you have this possibility of phase conjugation. The first time lasers produced negentropy in physics. Lasers did this, basically. And what's happening is that when the longitudinal waves converge implosively down that vortex, perfected vortex, it's called translation of vorticity, the transverse wave becomes a longitudinal wave at the tip of the pine cone. And that squirting out that longitudinal wave is the physics of gravity and is the physics of engaging into the array of the collective unconscious. That's the whole idea, that the media of the collective mind, communion of saints, Akashic records. And so that's the point, that if you visualize the plasma at the center where the pine cones are kissing noses, it's not just one Planck length threshold where the squirt gun works. It's an array of compressed plasma at the center, a soup. But in that soup, the longer the wavelengths compressing into that soup, the more the number of harmonics of Planck golden ratio are embedded. So inside the primal plasma soup at the center of compression, only waves that sort themselves into Planck golden ratio star mother kits get to survive, and everything else is canceled. That's called the origin of negentropy in the way self-organization was first measured in laser physics. And now we know there's much longer wave phase conjugation, self-organization possible, for example, phase conjugate magnetics, Therify, things like that. So this is the map. You've seen these pictures before, golden ratio embedding, the Sufi heart with wings, and indeed the moment of maximum pressure in the touch that says love, 0.618, actually creates that exact same physics. And so we have to use our favorite. I think I must have made that animation about 35 years ago, guys. I'm getting younger, though. And so we're not going to do the advanced physics today, but this is the equation for origin of negentropy. Multiply Planck times golden ratio, and you get all negentropic living systems. 3 radii of hydrogen, ADP, photosynthesis, and the definition of sacred dimensions. In architecture, the British foot is precisely golden ratio times Planck. Hello, embeddability defines the sacred because it enables compression. And so we did this. This is our published papers on this. We took the Klein-Gordon equations and proved golden ratio is the solution to constructive interference and therefore the cause of gravity. And then this is Tom Bearden agreeing with us. Longitudinal waves are what gravity waves are made of and the way biology is activated. So if you want to cause a seed to grow, if you want to cause a child to grow, that's why the Schumann harmonics are a golden ratio phase conjugate pump wave, just like Elena's breathing, because the Schumann harmonics make the pump wave that energizes biology, children, and seeds. We won't go into the Einstein's mistakes. And so our plasma vortex is the imploder.com. And actually, the super imploder has just been relaunched with a new professional vortex nozzle. You'll see that at the imploder.com. And notice that the two plasma vortex here look like pine cones, therify.net. And these are the frequencies that drive them here, which is this phase conjugate cascade. So this is the picture of what's happening where the pine cones cascade. And this is the frequencies which make therify.net work, and the frequencies which make Schumann work, and the frequencies which make Bliss work, and the frequencies which make the breath work, the perfect phase conjugate pump wave. So the reason gravity exists in all centripetal force, just to review, is golden ratio enables. This is a top-down view of DNA and every living protein, and DNA, Earth grid, zodiac, and the universe. And the reason negentropy exists and gravity exists is because the waves can add and multiply recursively, not just the wavelength, but the phase velocity. And when phase velocities recursively heterodyne constructively, compression towards center becomes acceleration towards center, named the gravity, and also named consciousness, because consciousness is centripetal for the same reason gravity is centripetal. That's why you cannot know what consciousness is or life until you know why an object falls to the ground, which leaves Einstein, NASA, and Stephen Hawking out of the conversation, sadly. So this braiding, then, we want to investigate the braiding process in DNA to understand the Grail from Enki, basically. And this is the Caduceus from the Emerald Tablets of Thoth Hermes, who supposedly is the co-author of the Nine, if you believe Andrea Puharich. And we had a lot of fun. I knew Andrea at the time. And if you line up those Grail cups 4 around, just like our animation of the Grail, this is called the Kapa, literally the Bonpo Tibetan alphabet. So what's a Bonpo? A flame in the mind, a bonfire. And we discussed with Elena about the Ophanic-Enochian alphabet. Again, 5 spins, 7 spins, became the Ophanic-Enochian alphabet, is the letters used to make the movie Stargate. And here's the Ophanic-Enochian. The angel alphabet is basically a plasma index to implode plasma. And that's the physics of Stargate because of the reason we're discussing. That's enables action at a distance and the Stargate portal to the other longitudinal nodes. So biophysics of top-down DNA, decagonal. And this is a model then in 3D of how the galaxies would embed that, why the zodiac spin has to be embedded by golden ratio into galaxy spins to stabilize gravity and life force. So imagine the work that Enki had to do to embed the Earth into the galaxy so that our Schumann resonance was perfect phase conjugate tuned to make life. The 12 houses and the golden ratio 3-dimensional sine waves and the double vortex pine cones kissing noses, all our old and favorite animations. So now we want to see what's happening in the DNA at the moment of implosion. That's the idea. And so if we animate the 3-dimensional ratchet of a dodecahedron down the helix, which maps accurately the double helix of DNA, what that double helix is doing when the long wave phonon embeds, remember, so we've got these golden ratio brainwave and heart harmonics, long wave phonons, literally imploding the DNA at the moment of bliss, and when kids see without their eyes, that implosion is what we want to model in 3D. And that's what the Grail animation is about. So this is how Jodie Foster did it in Contact. So here's the calculated frequencies in blue, and here's the Schumann harmonics in green. So this is actually the Schumann harmonics. Encke got it almost right, though, when they designed the Earth orbit to make the Schumann harmonics into a phase conjugate pump wave. You calculate, you get blue here. You take the actual Schumann harmonics, you get green. So the Earth is almost perfectly negentropic. So Lovelock was close to it. So to understand the Holy Grail, then coming back, our DNA restored, we start by looking at the heart of hydrogen, which is the center of every ladder rung bond. Here's the DNA ladder rung bonds. Every codon of DNA is pent, hex, golden rectangle. And that golden rectangle at the center of every DNA codon, ladder rung bond, is hydrogen. Hydrogen is the zipper of that helix. It's the zipper. And what is hydrogen? There's the top-down view right there. So the day I wrote that equation, Planck times powers of golden ratio equals precisely 3 radii of hydrogen right here. Not only is that the first time physics proved that hydrogen is fractal, but that was the day we understood how hydrogen is making gravity. Because of that implosion there, the fractality of hydrogen. And these are the published papers explaining that that's the cause of gravity, why objects fall to the ground. So now what's happening in the middle of DNA when it braids recursively and implodes? I think it looks like the Grail. So what's Encke bringing back? The ability to have perfected bliss, basically. That, you know, we used to call the spacers between the active codons junk DNA, and now we realize the spacer is the alphabet. The spacer is the index that determines that alignment. The spacer is how the active sites are energized and activated at the moment of implosion. So if you didn't have coherent phonons lining up your DNA, you wouldn't be able to select which codons to replicate. So the spacers make the phonon wave work in coherent DNA. So it's not junk, it's the opposite of junk DNA, actually. And this is the original from Ann Ting, who really was my teacher on this, from Geometric Extensions of Consciousness, proving that the vertical axis is golden ratio, the horizontal increment of turn and the vertical increment of turn are golden ratio squared, golden ratio cubed in the literal structure of DNA. And if you look, lattice cobweb tunnel spiral, the drawing of how this braiding was superposed to create DNA here is literally exactly the Heinrich Clouvet form constants, what everyone sees at the moment of death. They see this, lattice cobweb tunnel spiral. Now we know why that's what you see at the moment of death, because if you can't braid implode, well, you can't enter the array, the collective unconscious. So we played this animation. And so this is the coherent heart. The actual, when I discovered that heart coherence affects DNA braid, this is when Glenn Ryan measured it at my suggestion. This is the amount of density of the enzyme responsible for DNA braid responding to heart coherence, actually, the real definition. And that became realheartcoherence.com, which is Patrick and my latest way to measure empathy and teach love. I mean, Tantra, realheartcoherence.com. And so this is the heart harmonics braid in phase with the brain harmonics, the braid. And that's the caduceus of Hermes, Thoth. And that's the heart harmonics imploding. And so this becomes not just the way the breath embeds in the short wave to the long correctly, perfect fractal fern, but this is the way heart rate variability, harmonic inclusiveness, actually defines health. That harmonic inclusiveness defines immune health. Yes, let's do a question. I've been talking.
Sorry, just remark the previous picture, just before this one on the top left, you have perfect embedding. Yes, perfect embedding. This one, yes. So it totally reminds me the double coil, the toroidal and the poloidal, two directions of what is used to create anti-gravity in a spacecraft. I published that in my last book. Wait a minute. You have a double toroid, which goes two donuts, one in the other. One goes like this, and the other one goes like this.
All right. You're
And
superposing two axes of spin. You got axis of spin this way, axis of spin the other way, perpendicular, and you put them together, you have a spiral on the donut. Yes. Yes, nice. Yes. And actually,
this one
if we
is
relate
in
that,
this one, you know, and the both
yes,
are, I show you a better picture. Yeah.
yes. And that relates to the Mercury vortex story, Vimana Nazi Bell.
And they are at the best, the more current, these two, that's a cut. They are at the bottom underneath, and they, when they activated, both activated, they create anti-gravity.
Yes. And the idea is, yes, that, yes, and I think we actually, Elaine and I did have this discussion a bit in the film we did together on the nature of propulsion, which similar to Schauberger's piezoelectrically doped water vortex imploding and making voltage from gravity and making gravity, what's happening in the more powerfully in the iron powder doped red mercury Vimana Nazi Bell, which is, I think, how the Nazis started. What's happening is you have the translation of vorticity implosively in the hydrodynamic spiral multiplied by the superposed in phase magnetic flux density enabled by the soluble iron powder made soluble by a wetting agent. And our people have researched that, why it was red mercury. But what's happening is at the center of that implosive vortex, the perfect squeeze is precisely translating the transverse up and down inertia into compressed and longitudinally aligned inertia, spitting out the longitudinal coherence, defining a gravity wave, if we believe Bearden, actually, and therefore making gravity. So once you understand that spinning out a compressed longitudinal wave defines a gravity wave, then you can begin to talk about how a vortex makes gravity. And it's the superposing of those axes of spin, beautifully put, Elena, yes. And I don't know if we wanted that much physics here. The only piece that has not finished from what we promised from where we started this conversation was, we said we're going to talk about how plasma becomes intelligent. And I think we've done that a little bit. And then we're going to say we wanted to know what was coming back when Enki said the Grail was coming back. And I think we understand that a little better now. But the one thing we didn't finish was the conversation about how did the lucid dreaming become a portal? And is it really about turning inside out? And that's the last piece of the slideshow. But before we do that, any other comments or questions, please?
I just wanted to say that Elena's illustration in her book about the propulsion and all of that, very well done, very well done. Because from the physics and engineering perspective, that's, Dan, if I'm not mistaken, that's the opposing 180-degree angles that are spinning on each other's axis respectively. So that creates the center point. So you need, by definition, at least two to start. And the more axes of spin that are superposed perpendicularly, the more harmonics that are going to show up in the vortex. And that harmonic, by definition, more non-destructive self-implosion, so therefore more propagation afterwards. That's right. So eventually, if you get a long enough wave in that vortex, you can get, a lot more gravity. And that's why, going to the next dimension is called going to the next density. What they actually mean is going to the next superposed axes of spin rotation. Right. And we could probably liken this as well to the purse example, reaching into you could say the 0 point, the vacuum, you name it, the unlimited or infinite amount of those, I guess you could say, onion layers. Yes. The infinite layers of that onion become resolved when you get enough to the still point to sort and focus. And lucid dreamers can really communicate with interstellar beings, as Elena appears to do. So on that note, I just maybe to try to do that last little piece of the slideshow. Remember, in the last piece of the slideshow here, now we're trying to figure out what is it about that lucid dream, using the example of John Charles Moyen here. So here we were talking about these donuts, and we had too many pictures. Oh yeah, that the DNA becoming a toroid is Lord of the Ring, and look at the letters on the side of the donut. Oh, it's the letters in Lord of the Ring, and that's the index too. And Frodo says, if you hold that ring, you have all power. Oh, did he have pure intention? So
So this is now we're going to get to the thing about Jean-Charles Moyen's lucid dream. So here we see the actual known Schumann harmonics, which we now see are a phase conjugate cascade. And here we see where we measure them, thanks to Patrick Bauty, who's here, the life force measure at flameinmind.com. This happens to be a tree that's very happy. This could be a human that's very happy, but in both cases, they're getting this phase conjugate pump wave and therefore imploding. A tree having bliss and a human having bliss actually are exactly the same power spectra. What a coincidence. And trees having bliss are very healthy, I will tell you by experience. So this is showing the evidence that the calculated harmonics in blue and the Schumann harmonics in green define the brainwave harmonics during bliss. This is flameinmind.com. This is 5 harmonics. This is me having bliss experience. And by the way, I've learned from Patrick that because I did not get up to gamma here, my lucid dream did not become a portal. I don't got much gamma yet. Okay. So this is also, we're saying, defines peacemaking, because the centripetal force at the center of that plasma is the only definition of peacemaking in psychology, in politics, and in physics, is the negentropy of the center of that plasma. And we make that point at peaceuniversity.net, that if you rearrange the magnetic lines of the village A and village B, you can actually measure when war breaks out and when peace breaks out by actually creating that embeddability, that implosion in the magnetic line. So peacemaking is defined by the conversation we just had, that negentropy. This is me, 5 harmonics of bliss, having great bliss experience, but gamma, not quite there. And let's see, this is more from Flamen. See, this is where we're beginning to measure the front brain versus the back brain, thanks to Patrick.
I have an observation. It said that peace is the moment when 2 parts come and meet in the middle to make a compromise, like they come and they meet in the middle and they agree.
Yes,
that's the vision. That's the same thing.
It's literally perfected agreement. Exactly. Thank you.
If I could add as well to what Elena and is saying with respects to compromising and making agreements, by definition, the things that I guess you could say either party or person was, I guess you could say, disappointed on, that they could not agree to, by definition, that form of reflection allows for them to be able to then say during that initial compromise, okay, how can we further this? And then that's your non-destructive self-implosion. That's your toroid field.
Yes.
Even more. Yeah.
Like a critical mass of agreement. Once we realize that we're made of the same wave shape, we learn to agree, because that's the nature of life itself.
Well, if I could say very quickly, this is something, if I may, I would love to convey to Dan and Elena's audience, specifically with respects to, we say on our end of things, this concept of perhaps disagreements should not be labeled disagreements, if you will, because by definition, one having a piece of something that the other doesn't makes up the full pie or pizza, if you will. So it's kind of like this concept of labeling disagreements almost seems to deliberately ensure that we do not non-destructively self-implode, to your point, Dan.
Yeah, so that if we correctly labeled our disagreements as us filling in missing pieces of each other, let us more correctly label our disagreements. There's a piece of me. Or at the end of the best Sufi story, the climax line, I don't remember that well. He was running down the road and he thought someone was chasing him, and he jumped into the ditch. And the person he thought was chasing him leaned over the ditch and spoke with great compassion, said, "Why are you here? Why did you jump inside the ditch?" And the person realizes that he was a fool for thinking that someone was chasing him. And this person has compassion. And then he has to figure out what to say. And at the end of the Sufi story, he says, "I know. I am here because of you, and you are here because of me." That's my last Sufi story for the day. So this is showing that the Schumann harmonics and the breath harmonics and the brainwave harmonics and the heart harmonics and the osteopathic sacrocranial harmonics, and this was started with my equation, but this Patrick assembled this slide. Thank you, Patrick. Really, you should take a bow here. And so this is the nature, that the broad spectral implosion from all the way from Schumann to the breath to the heart is all about phase conjugate pump wave implosion. So now, after all that, Why did Jean-Charles Moyen's lucid dream become a portal? The final question in our slideshow, and Patrick put this together. And basically, Jean-Charles described that he had a very strong urge. And I think you remember that, Elena, when he was young and he had this very strong urge.
Yes.
And then this lucid dream onset, he'd have this intense feeling of compression, actually. And Jean-Charles went out and got flameandmind.com, and we measured, thanks to Jean-Charles. And this is Patrick's analysis here. And so indeed, from alpha in green on the bottom, the cascade to the gamma up top. This is similar to what Patrick measured with Iris's kids when they could see without their eyes, except, Patrick, you want to say the amplitude. Is that right, Patrick?
Yes, the amplitude was much, much bigger. Yes, with Jean-Charles.
Yeah. So in Jean-Charles' case, the amplitude of the coherence in his brainwaves was kind of off the charts. Patrick had to turn down the gain, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
It was it was already the case for the kids, huh?
Yeah.
But it was much, much bigger with Jean-Charles. Yes.
Yeah. So he had extreme brainwave cascade coherence, literally implosive. So the caduceus ladder of his brainwave harmonics from alpha in green to gamma up top, which is around 44 hertz, 50 hertz. That cascade, the blue points are golden ratio harmonics and the pink points are octave harmonics. So that cascade locked in tremendous implosion in his brainwaves. And what we're saying now is we understand what that is, that the critical inertia escape velocity was reached at the core of the longitudinal, and the entire plasma array could implode through the center specifically by turning inside out recursively, looking like. So when Jean-Charles said just before that happened to him, what did he say, Patrick? He said his left eye and his right eye. Do you remember?
I don't remember which one. With one eye, he saw his room, and with the other eye, he saw the
place he was going to.
He wanted to go. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, the one eye, suddenly one eye was seeing where he was, and the other eye was seeing where he's going, literally at the same time. And then he finds himself on a beach, having portaled, literally done a Stargate, and comes back, and there's witnesses. He had the sand between his toes and the water. It was real. It was a portal. What did he do? The urge to turn inside out implosively. So it was more than I would turn myself inside out for you, darling. It was literally consumed perspective.
He even teleported. He did that when he had the urge to be with his girlfriend. He was in his room, and then that happened. He saw in one eye where he was in his bedroom, and the other eye, the room of his girlfriend was at the other side of the town or another town, and he teleported. Physically, he disappeared and he reappeared. He appeared at her doorstep in pajamas.
He went to his lover. Is that motivation?
I actually know of a few individuals who have also experienced this as well. Yeah.
Oh, really? That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes. And this was the visual here is actually from a study of the tower in New England. James Egan did from John Dee's design of the Rhode Island Tower. And indeed, it's about consumed perspective, that you see it inside out. If the compression point is correct in the vision, it literally turns inside out.
Dan, if I may ask, that second image you have here on the bottom, if we see, for example, the center mirror point, could we liken that to if we keep with the example of the purse, if you will, accessing the, again, a 0 point hyperspace, subspace, whatever you want to call it, this idea of reaching into that infinite realm of potentials to appear where your intent sets you?
Yeah, and I think the Sufis say it's all done with mirrors. but the thing about the turning inside out, yes, is that that convergence point is the sorting point, and if the compression isn't complete, it's not sorted there. And so this is also about origin of alphabets, and there's a whole thing about Ophanim and Enochian here, which is the angel alphabets. And notice that implosive compression and the symmetry of the angel alphabets, and actually the 7 spins becoming the 5 spins.
This is exhibited as well as in Minkowski space-time as well, that in terms of, they don't go nearly as far as you do, Dan, but in terms of Mr. Minkowski discussing that implosion point.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And, you know, they call it Einstein-Rosen bridge, and they call it entanglement. But entanglement perfected is what we're saying, precisely what this phase conjugate embedding is. So, well, we got to the end of all the pictures.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But I think there were some questions that Real, you wanted to ask Elena, wasn't there? Or any other open conversation here?
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of things to bring up related to the space program and all the work that Elena does. But Dan, there was actually a slide that you had. It was slide 68, where you talk about Enki almost getting it right with the Earth embedding into the galactic fractal array with the Schumann harmonics.
Yeah.
So what did you mean by he almost got it right? Does that mean that, like, could somebody have messed with it after he had created it, or could you just elaborate on that idea?
Yeah, we Patrick and I were not picking on Enki at that point, but Patrick and I, remember, we ran around the country. We had just figured out that perfect implosion was 50 hertz. If you take the Schumann cascade golden ratio to Planck, you get, you know, 7.29 hertz golden ratio, and then you get 50 hertz, and you keep going, you get, you know, the other frequency, 28 kilohertz, measured, all the frequencies measured in the pyramids. However, Patrick and I go running around these various sacred places, and we keep measuring 53 hertz, and it ought to be 50. And we're scratching our head and scratching our head. And then we realized the theoretically correct Schumann perfect phase conjugate is 7.29. The measured actual Schumann is 7.83 hertz. You take that ratio and cascade by golden ratio, you get 50 versus 53 exactly. Hello? That's called almost. In other words, when Enki went to his crew, the Galactic Federation, I assume, the Cedar, my guess, this is just a guess, is the Cedars, Elena's Cedars specifically, going to all this trouble to design the solar system. You know, the moon fits the perfect cone too. There's too many coincidences. Somebody was designing. And now here we got this Schumann cascade that's almost precisely, a phase conjugate pump wave. It was 50 instead of 53. Because remember, they measured 53 in all the pyramids. Because the pyramids are doing Schumann cascade to the actual Schumann phase conjugate. And that's why Sam Osmanagic in the Bosnian pyramid measured 28 kilohertz at the top, because that's 53 times golden ratio, not 50. Anyway, so the Schumann cascade is almost. They did a pretty good job of making us negentropic. Perfect? Well, you know, if it was perfect, that would be the rapture. And the rapture would be when guns will melt and the ancestors will rise. However, plasma distribution, we may not be quite ready.
So then with all the talk about the solar flash and us raising our consciousness and going to the next level, is that when it will actually be the perfect ratio, when the rapture, quote unquote, occurs? And are we supposed to create that ourselves?
Well, you know how Agnihotra and prayer and healing works so much better at sunrise and sunset. It's because the perpendicularity of phase conjugation embeds longitudinal. It's real. You feel your hair stands up. Well, suppose that sunrise sunset is a galactic sunrise. Supposing the solar equator is now aligning perpendicularly with the galactic equator. The erection of the Holy Cross, Nick Fiorenza called it, or the return of the photon cloud. There's many, many names. But those perpendicularities reflect the natural alignment with galactic equators. And at those points, the compression waves become longer. And the necessity in the solar system, us as plasma, experiences compression. And therefore, those who aren't ready go nuts faster. Those who are ready experience radically increasing bliss and lucid dreaming. And ultimately, yes, guns will melt because the dielectric is wrong and the ancestors rise. It's good physics because the plasma of ancestral memory is enabled to be distributed. And you do not want to be the left behind, said the fundamentalist.
That would be what some would call the split, I guess, by definition.
Perhaps. I think, yes, thank you. I think Elena wanted to say something.
Yeah, I believe the guns will melt is a metaphor for the war and the conflict and the aggressiveness will melt, because the collective consciousness will reach out to a new state, a new frequency, new range of frequency, in which the lower frequency of conflict won't be able to be there. What do you think?
Yeah, nicely said. And for the similar reason why, if you have some anger, you're not going to go into bliss, or you're not going to die well, because these are not compressible emotions. Compressible emotions means you've distilled every human experience to pure principle. And that is a perfectly shareable wave that can enter the DNA library, which is a longitudinal array. Exactly.
And on that note, Elena, actually during a recording I was doing where I'm just like auditing the news basically to try to dispel all the negativity and all the mumbo jumbo about what's going on with geopolitics of world orders and stuff like that, I specifically referenced Dan's work about imploding non-destructively and how we need to push for peace and nonviolence. And an orb flew behind me during the recording, and I caught it on camera. And that just happened in the past like 7 days. So
living plasma.
Yeah, absolutely. So it felt like I was given a sign about the message that I'm trying to promote. So yeah, exactly what you're saying there. Thank you so much. Wow.
I note that Iris is here, and we talked about your program of teaching kids to see without their eyes. Did you want to say something, or just a short summary of the magic you do to get those kids into that magic state of mind, Iris? Or
yeah, it's exactly what you said earlier. It is this. I see myself as a space holder for the children to enter their own journey of rediscovering what's already there. So I create this field of trust and relaxation, and I guide their focus. Because you also explained it's the focus attention that's what brings out the vortex. So they start experiencing at first these little light points, or stars they call them, like white dots inside the mask, and then eventually they open up. And they see reality as it is, as there would be no mask.
Even if they're blindfolded, so you say the points of light, and then suddenly the tube opens up, and they can see without their eyes. And they said originally that some of the people doing this told the kids to imagine they were in beautiful nature, and the body flips a switch, and you get fractal and bliss.
Yeah.
It's a perfect safe space, basically. But see, Iris has the skill and the patience and the empathy to work with groups of kids doing that. And we measured a lot of that work at flameinmind.com/outer vision. But Iris, do you want to give the website for your current project? Is it Metal?
Yeah, it's Metaal Kathedraal. So it's Metal Cathedral in Dutch. So it's metaalkathedraal.nl.
It means to meet all in the cathedral. We'll put the link in the show notes here, but they're actually starting a center and a project to work with the kids there in Netherlands, and we're going to make that global. This is a shareable wave. So we have to honor Iris for hanging in there, working with those kids. And Patrick went up there several times to help teach the kids, and it's all beautiful.
Thank you so much for doing that. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm starting to teach others as well now, to share my knowledge and experience, and inspire other adults to start working with the children. Although what I see, it's like a journey of self-discovery for the adults, mostly because the children, for them, it's much more easy to find this inner light. And we have to do the work of deprogramming ourselves to get in balance again, to relax into balance again and coherence.
Yeah, to find the inner light.
So if the children would start teaching or showing each other, I think it would be all over the world in no time.
Because they say the kids, kids who lack self-confidence, et cetera, they just blossom when they learn how to see without their eyes, because they feel very empowered. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of good things happen to the children. It's balance on all levels. It's mentally, it's emotionally, their intuition is much stronger, creativity starts flowing,
And then they know.
It's the starting point for.
It's like the perfect initiation. Like they say, now I know how I'm going to see when I lucid dream, and now I know I'm going to see after I die. Therefore, there is no fear.
Yeah, yeah. And the children, they start to experience more empathy, like less quarrels at home. Children start to tidy their rooms, you know, without their parents having to tell it.
It's like a bliss process.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, amazing.
Thank you. Yes, Elena.
Iris, I'm totally totally impressed and incredible what you are doing. So I want to ask, so this can be applied to children, blind children who are born without the sight, biological sight. If they learn how to do that, they can see the world,
Yeah,
their environment.
Yes.
That's how it started in St. Petersburg. Yeah, like it was called World Without Blindness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't experience it myself yet, but I also know in Germany there's also a woman. Her name is Katharina Friedrich, and she's also a teacher. And she also guided a young boy who was blind from birth, and eventually he could place like a ball inside of a transparent cup without touching the edges of the cup. Yeah.
He could see very sharply. He had been blind since birth. He was taught to see. Amazing. It's so beautiful. Wow. It's just, isn't that gorgeous? Wow. Just gives you my hair standing up right now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Iris. Well, this has been blissful.
I do have, if I may, I have one question for Patrick, if that's all right, with respect to the brainwave oscillations, sir. What's something that you notice most significantly, I guess, in terms of more so, I guess, with the children, when you notice their capabilities to be able to, as Dan says, non-destructively self-implode? Is it the gamma waves that finally hit that tipping point for the implosion, or?
Well, in fact, what we see, you know, on the picture, there are different colors on the spectrum. The lower part was green. It was the gamma frequency of the brain. And there are a lower part in the gamma, which is about 7-8 hertz. And the upper part of the gamma is about, 12 or something like that. And what we have noticed is that when people are going to a beautiful, deep meditating state, they're very relaxed, they tend to go to lower gamma, lower alpha, I'm sorry.
Yeah, lower
maybe
that's right.
Lower alpha. So it's 7-8 hertz, which is close to Schumann. But when the kids are opening this tunnel, and also it was the same for Jean-Charles, we got a peak, a very big peak for Jean-Charles. For the kids, it depends, but the peak is always on the top of the alpha range. So you see that instead of having a lower alpha peak, close to Schumann, we have the frontier, the peak in the alpha is the frontier between alpha and beta. And then above, when we go up, there are a beautiful cascade of frequencies. And if you take, that's what Dan showed, there are two colors in the peak, a color in pink and the other in blue. One is mentioning the peak corresponding to golden ratio, the other one to octave ratio. And when you go at, that's what Dan is showing here. You see the big pink rectangle. There are two peak reference, one in blue, one in pink. And there, in fact, it's where golden ratio and octave ratio fits together at the same frequency regarding to the alpha peak, which is the big peak in green below. You see, and this we really see a lot of times for the kids, and we have also mentioned it for Jean-Charles. But you see on this picture there are some other peaks which are also coming at the same place with the peak, where the peak should be mentioned.
So in other words, the cascade, you got a golden ratio cascade of harmonics and an octave cascade, and where they can land together at one point in the gamma, it locks in the ladder from the top to the bottom. The bottom is locked in. The alpha is the defining starting point always. And when the top harmonics up in the gamma, where the alpha and the octave cascade can synchronize together, now the ladder is locked together at the top and the bottom. And that could make that more coherently implosive, basically. The octave cascade is the tetracubic, and the golden ratio cascade is pent, and that's the 7-spin, 5-spin.
Wow. I just want to thank you, Patrick, for doing that work, sir, because the more I look at that particular graph or chart, I actually may ask Dan to send it to me privately, the more I take away from it, because there's a lot that you can interpret from the different fluctuations and oscillations.
All of that graphic is at flameinmind.com, and flameinmind.com/lucidbrain is the project with Jean-Charles, and flameinmind.com/outervision is the project with Iris. So yes, this is a shareable wave. So
I just would like to add, may I add something then?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, we focus on the children, and for children it's quite easy to experience this side, but it's there for all of us. I really came to realize it's a natural human ability that we were born with.
Yes.
And the more balanced our brains and our emotional system is, the more easy it is for us to tap into that potential again. I always invite the parents to be present when I work with the children, also to inspire them and to teach them and to let them participate. And sometimes parents go standing in a corner, take a mask and start practicing themselves. And so I also have parents that started to see. Yeah.
Almost as if you're synchronizing both the children's heart fluctuations and oscillations with the planet's heart.
Yeah, and that's where Patrick teaches the breath coherence with the HRV, and now he's measuring the infrasound of the heart and brain together at Flame in Mind. It reminds me also, recently I was in a church in South France, and I saw that with my eyes closed, I could see down the magnetic line, and it reminded me when you see these Aboriginal shaman, they're there with their eyes closed, you think they're sleeping, but in fact they're looking down the song lines. So was that a happily ever after, Elena? How are we doing?
I'm very enjoying this very much.
Because I think your book, when we said Enki and Thoth are returning, and the Galactic Federation, the Seeders, what were they seeding? They were seeding the principles of life force itself. And we teach this as science. This becomes empowering. That's the point. Yes, thank you. There's Vindur with the mask on. You see, there's our star little girl with her mask on right now. She can see us without her.
Yay.
And she, we measured a bunch of young people. But
so what does this mask exactly do?
Well, you see now, in other words, she can't see anything.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And yet when she closes her eyes and goes into that special state, that little wormhole opens inside and she can see without her eyes. Wow. And they use the mask to practice.
So if she sees, she is seeing the screen of the computer at the moment?
De vraagt of jij het zegt. Yes.
So let's do how many fingers I am showing.
She got it. Perfect.
Thank you.
Wonderful, Vindur. You are a hero, dear.
You are amazing. This is who we are, people. This is the human.
Yeah. Like maybe I have this pack of cards here. I can just take one.
Okay.
Whatever. So I can show it to you first.
Okay.
One green. Yes.
It's one. She knew it was a one.
Yeah.
She's blindfolded, but she can see. That's the point. She can play. It's so cool, guys. This is Bliss Process 101. So that is the happily ever after, guys. The Grail is the bliss.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. This is great. Thank you so very much.
Thank you too. Elena, just one question. When we were talking about this compression, Can you tell us a little bit more? Is it close to the heartbeat frequencies, or is it slower or faster?
When you pump,
Okay, I do. The rhythm is woo, 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 woo. That's the rhythm. I compress it.
Almost a heartbeat.
yeah, that's around 1 second, once a second. Yes, 60, 50, maybe it's 50 hertz based on,
I don't know.
because whenever
That's what the rhythm.
yeah, it's about
Maybe
one.
50, yes. Could be 52, 53 then.
Yeah, it's about, you know, 1 every second. It's, which is, by the way, related to the perfect heartbeat.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Interesting.
Okay.
Well, to be continued. Maybe someday Elena promised she's going to come and do a tour of France, and she can visit you there. Iris is in Belgium, and visit you there.
Yes, yes.
We're
I
planning a
love
tour
that.
for Elena.
I would
Elena,
love
next
to
year.
come and see what Iris is doing as well.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Oh yes.
So we're
Thank
planning
you.
a tour for Elena. To be continued.
Oh, every
Thank you, guys. It's been a blessing.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.